to be remembered by generations that will follow. I am sure we would all wish to be remembered as the generations of leaders that uplifted our world, that united our people and our countries to live together and in peaceful coexistence. Mr. President and fellow leaders, if we can leave a legacy that safeguards the survival and freedom of our future generations, we will have done our jobs well. To God be the glory. Great things He has done. Thank you, Mr. President.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister and Minister for National Security and Intelligence, Child Poverty Reduction and Ministerial Services of New Zealand. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency.
Я с большим удовольствием приветствую.
I have great pleasure in welcoming Her Excellency Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister and Minister for National Security and Intelligence, Child Poverty Reduction and Ministerial Services of New Zealand. I invite her to address the Assembly.
Ina mana, ina reo, raurangatira mā, kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei whare nui o te ao. Nā mihi mai aha kia koutou katoa, mai tōku whenua o Aotearoa. Tuia ki runga. Tuia ke raro, ka rongo to pō ka rongo te ao. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary-General, friends, I greet you in Te Reo Māori, the language of the tangata whenua or First People of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I acknowledge the leaders who are here, gathered in person after a long and difficult period. And as is tradition in my country, I also acknowledge those who have passed. Loss brings with it a chance for reflection. And as leaders, between us, we each represent countries and communities who have lost much in these past few years. Through famine, severe weather, natural disasters, and a pandemic. COVID-19 was devastating. It took millions of lives. It continues to impact on our economies and with that, the well-being of our people. It set us back in our fight against the crisis of climate change and progress on the Sustainable Development Goals while we looked to the health crisis that was right in front of us. And while we enter a period now where the crisis is subsiding, the lessons cannot. COVID schooled us. It forced us to acknowledge how interconnected and therefore how reliant we are on one another. We move between one another's countries with increasing ease. We trade our goods and services. And when one link in our supply chain is impacted, we all are. The lessons of COVID are in many ways the same as the lessons of climate change. When crisis is upon us, we cannot and will not solve these issues on our own. The next pandemic will not be prevented by one country's efforts, but by all of ours. Climate action will only ever be as successful as the least committed country as they pull down the ambition of the collective. Now, I'm not suggesting, though, that we rely on the goodwill of others to make progress. We need a dual strategy, one where we push for collective effort, but where we also use our multilateral tools to make progress. And that's why on pandemic preparedness, we support efforts to develop a new global health legal instrument, strengthened international health regulations, and a strong and empowered World Health Organization. It's why we're such advocates of the World Trade Organization and its reform to ensure supply chains remain open and critical goods and services are not subjected to protectionism in times of need. It's why we've worked so hard within the Paris Agreement to see the action we need on climate, while also doing our bit at home, including putting a 1.5-degree warming limit into law increasing our NDC to 50% below 2005 levels by 2030, and quadrupling our climate finance commitment. Now, whether it's climate, trade, health crises, or seeking peaceful solutions to war and conflict, New Zealand has always been a believer in multilateral tools. We were amongst the founding members of the United Nations as governments of the day recognised the perils of war would only be avoided through a greater sense of shared responsibility. The basis on which this institution was formed remains as relevant today as it was then. But without reform, we risk irrelevancy. Now, there is perhaps no greater example of this than Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let us all be clear, Russia's war is illegal. It is immoral. It is a direct attack on the UN Charter and the international rules-based system and everything that this community should stand for. Putin's suggestion that it could at any point deploy further weapons that it has at their disposal reveals the false narrative that they have based their invasion on. What country, who claims to be a liberator, threatens to annihilate the very civilians they claim to liberate? This war is based on a lie. But I recognize that for the people of Ukraine who have lost loved ones, their sense of peace and security, their livelihoods, these are all just words. They need us as a global community to ask one simple question: what if it was us? Now, our ability to answer that question with any confidence that we have the tools as a global community to act swiftly and collectively has been severely undermined. In March, when we most needed the UN Security Council to act in the defence of international peace and security, it could not. It did not fulfil its mandate because of one permanent member who was willing to abuse its privileged position. That was wrong. We will not give up on the ability of our multilateral institutions to stand up against this illegal war or to take on the many challenges we face. These institutions are the ballast we need, but it's a ballast that requires modernisation fit for the tumultuous waters we all face. That is why New Zealand was pleased to champion the veto initiative. Not only does it provide an opportunity to scrutinise the actions of the permanent member who cast a veto, the veto initiative gives the whole UN membership a voice where the Security Council has been unable to act. But we continue to call for more than that. For the United Nations to maintain its relevancy and ensure that it truly is the voice of the breadth of countries it represents, the veto must be abolished. Permanent members must exercise their responsibility for the benefit of international peace and security rather than the pursuit of national interest. There are other battles that we continue to wage as a nation, including our call for a global response to the use of nuclear weapons. Our history of championing not just non-proliferation, but a prohibition on nuclear weapons is grounded in what we have witnessed, but also what we have experienced. We are a nation that is both of the Pacific and within it. It was in our region that these weapons of war were tested. Those tests have left a mark on the people, lands, and waters of our home. And the only way to guarantee our people that they will be safe from the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons is for them not to exist. That's why New Zealand calls on all states that share this conviction to join the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Now, some will call such a position naive. Some believe that we are safer as a result of nuclear weapons. In New Zealand, we have never accepted the wisdom of mutually assured destruction. It takes one country to believe that their cause is nobler, their might stronger, their people more willing to be sacrificed. And none of us can stand on this platform and turn a blind eye to the fact that there are already leaders amongst us who believe this. Nuclear weapons do not make us safer. There will be those who agree, but believe it's simply too hard to rid ourselves of nuclear weapons at this juncture. There is no question that nuclear disarmament is an enormous challenge. But if given the choice, and we are being given a choice, surely we would choose the challenge of disarmament than the consequences of a failed strategy of weapons-based deterrence. And this is why we will continue to advocate for meaningful progress on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Progress and consensus that was recently blocked by Russia and represented a backward step to the efforts of nearly every country in the world to make even some limited progress on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. None of this will stop New Zealand's advocacy. We will remain a strong and passionate advocate for efforts to address the weapons of old. But we'll also be an advocate to address the weapons that are new. After all, the face of war has changed, and with that, the weapons used. The tools used to challenge the statehood of others are hidden and more complex. Traditional combat, espionage, and the threat of nuclear weapons are now accompanied by cyber attacks, prolific disinformation, and manipulation of whole communities and societies. Now, as leaders, we have never treated the weapons of old in the same way as those that have emerged. And that's understandable. After all, a bullet takes a life. A bomb takes out a whole village. A lie online or from a podium does not. But what if that lie, told repeatedly and across many platforms, prompts, inspires, or motivates others to take up arms, to threaten the security of others, to turn a blind eye to atrocities, or worse, to become complicit in them? What then? This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old. We recognize the threats that the old weapons created. We came together as communities to minimize these threats. We created international rules, norms, and expectations. We never saw that as a threat to our individual liberties. Rather, it was a preservation of them. The same must apply now as we take on these new challenges. In New Zealand, we deeply value our right to protest. Some of our major social progress has been brought about by hekoi, or people power, becoming the first country in the world to recognise women's right to vote, movement on major Indigenous and human rights issues, to name but a few. Upholding these values in a modern environment translates into protecting a free, secure, and open internet. To realise all of the opportunities that it presents in the way we communicate, the way we organise, the way we gather. But that does not mean the absence of transparency, expectations, or even rules, if we correctly identify what it is we are trying to prevent. And surely we can start with violent extremism and terrorist content online. On the 15th of March 2019, New Zealand experienced a horrific terrorist attack on its Muslim community. More than 50 people were killed as they prayed. The attack was live streamed on a popular social media platform in an effort to gain notoriety and to spread hate. At that time, the ability to thwart those goals was limited, and the chances of government alone being able to resolve this gap was equally challenging. And so that's why, alongside President Emmanuel Macron, we created the Christchurch Call to Action. The core community has worked together to address terrorism and violent extremist content online. And this important work progresses. We have demonstrated the impact we can have by working together collaboratively. We've improved crisis reactions, stymieing the ability to live stream attacks. We have crisis protocols that kick in to prevent proliferation. We're also focused on prevention, understanding the interactions between online environments and the real world that can lead to radicalisation. This week we launched an initiative alongside companies and non-profits to help improve research and understanding of how a person's online experiences are curated by automated processes. This will also be important in understanding more about mis- and disinformation online, a challenge that we must, as leaders, address. Sadly, I think it's easy to dismiss this problem as one in the margins. I can certainly understand the desire to leave it to someone else. As leaders, we're rightly concerned that even the most light-touch approaches to disinformation could be misinterpreted as being hostile to the values of free speech that we value so highly. But while I cannot tell you today what the answer is to this challenge, I can say with complete certainty that we cannot ignore it. To do so poses an equal threat to the norms we all value. After all, how do you successfully end a war if people are led to believe the reason for its existence is not only legal but noble? How do you tackle climate change if people do not believe it exists? How do you ensure the human rights of others are upheld when they are subjected to hateful and dangerous rhetoric and ideology? The weapons may be different, but the goals of those who perpetuate them is often the same: to cause chaos and reduce the ability of others to defend themselves, to disband communities, to collapse the collective strength of countries who work together. But we have an opportunity here to ensure that these particular weapons of war do not become an established part of warfare. And so, we once again come back to the primary tool we have: diplomacy, dialogue, working together on solutions that do not undermine human rights but enhance them. For those who have not sought out the Christchurch call to action, I ask that you consider it. As with so many of the challenges we face, we will only be as strong as those who do the least. In these times, I'm acutely aware of how easy it is to feel disheartened. We are facing many battles on many fronts, but there is cause for optimism, because for every new weapon we face, there is a new tool to overcome it. For every attempt to push the world into chaos is a collective conviction to bring us back to order. We have the means. We just need the collective will. Mai e toku ukaipo o Aotearoa, kara hui hui mai tātou, nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for National Security and Intelligence, Child Poverty Reduction and Ministerial Services of New Zealand for the statement just made. And I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul ya ibadiyallazina asrafu la taqnutu min rahmatillahi inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuban jamia. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as I stand here today to tell the story of my country, Pakistan, my heart and mind have not been able to leave home. Standing here, I still feel that I am visiting one of the flood-affected areas of Sindh and Balochistan of my country. No words can describe the shock we are living through or how the face of the country lies transformed. I have come to explain firsthand the scale and magnitude of this climate catastrophe that has pushed 1/3 of my country underwater in a superstorm that no one has seen in one's living memory. For 40 days and 40 nights, a biblical flood poured down on us, smashing centuries of weather records, challenging everything we knew about disaster and how to manage it. Even today, huge swaths of the country are still underwater, submerged in an ocean of human suffering. In this ground zero of climate change, 33 million people, including women and children, are now at high risk from health hazards. With 650,000 women giving birth in makeshift tarpaulins, more than 1,500 of my people have been gone from this world in this great flood, including over 400 children. Far more are in peril from disease and malnutrition. As we speak, millions of climate migrants are still looking for dry land to pitch their tents on, with heartbreaking losses to their families, their futures, and their livelihoods gone for long times to come. Early estimates suggest that more than 13,000 kilometers of metal roads have been damaged, over 370 bridges have been swept away, 1 million homes have been destroyed, and another million damaged. More than 1 million farm animals have been killed. 4 million acres of crops have been washed away, stripping the people of their breadbasket, and damage of an unimaginable scale. Mr. President, Pakistan has never seen a more stark and devastating example of the impact of global warming. Life in Pakistan has changed forever. I have visited personally and spent time in every corner of my devastated country. People in Pakistan ask, why? Why has this happened to them? When global warming rips apart whole families and an entire country at this ferocious speed, it is time to ask why, and time to ask not what can be done, but what must be done. The undeniable truth is that this calamity has not been triggered by anything we have done. Our glaciers are melting fast, our forests are burning, and our heat waves have crossed 53 degrees Celsius, making us the hottest place on the planet. And now, Mr. President, now we live through an unprecedented monster monsoon. It is literally a monsoon on steroids, as the UN Secretary General described it most befittingly. It is on steroids. One thing is very clear: what happened in Pakistan will not stay in Pakistan. As the Secretary General so candidly says, hotspots like Pakistan fall in the 10 most climate vulnerable list of countries, but emit less than 1% of the greenhouse gases that are burning our planet. It is therefore entirely reasonable to expect some approximation of justice for this loss and damage, not to mention building back better with resilience and strength. Clearly, the time for talk about action has passed. At this point, I am profoundly grateful that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited Pakistan, where he spent time with climate refugees, with mothers and children in the tents, and repeatedly assured us of his support and assistance. At this point, I want to thank each and every one of the countries that have sent help to Pakistan and their representatives to Pakistan to stand in solidarity with us in our most trying hour. On behalf of my nation, I once again express my sincerest appreciation to all of them. Excellencies, the impacts on the health and wealth of my country are beyond calculation at this point. So my real worry is about the next stage of this challenge, when the cameras would have gone or left this August Assembly and the story just shifts away to conflicts like the Ukraine. My question is, will we be left alone, high and dry, to cope with a crisis which we did not create, not of our doing? Where from and how to begin with to rehabilitate and reconstruct after the rescue and relief effort, which is still going on for 12 long weeks. For many of the lives we have saved, the future is dimmed by new fragility, lost homes, decimated livelihoods, deluged croplands, permanent food insecurity, and exposure to uncertain futures. Some 11 million people will be pushed further below the poverty line, while others will drift to cramped urban shelters, leaving little room for climate-smart rebuilding. Mr. President, for now, we have mobilized all available resources at our domain, squeezing resources from left and right towards the national relief effort, and repurposed all budget priorities, including development funds, to the rescue and first-order needs of millions, cash transfers to the most affected 4 million women, heads of household, had begun weeks ago via our Social Security program, the Benazir Income Support Program. It has been established in the name of former late Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, and her son is our foreign minister today. 70 billion rupees, or almost $300 million from our own pocket we are spending on this program. But at this point, the gap between our urgent needs and available resources is increasing by the day and amplified by the sheer unprecedented scale of this disaster. Our manpower and resources are totally overwhelmed and overstretched. The question to raise here is quite simple. Why are my people paying the price of such high global warming through no fault of ours? We have no contribution in this. Nature has unleashed her fury on Pakistan without looking at our carbon footprint, which is next to nothing. Our actions did not contribute to this. The dual cost of global inaction and climate injustice are having a crippling effect on both our treasury and our people, right here, right now, over there. Mr. President, this is going to be a long haul, and under these most trying circumstances, hope is the best enemy of darkness. And Pakistanis are known to be exceptionally resilient people. For my part, I am fully committed, fully geared to fighting this battle for our survival in the tents, in the trenches with my people, until we have rebuilt Pakistan to face the growing challenges of this century. It is high time we took a pause from the preoccupations of the 20th century to return to the challenges of the 21st century. The entire definition of national security has changed today. And unless the leaders of the world come together to act and act now on an agreed common agenda, there will be no earth to fight wars over. Nature will be fighting back, and for that, humanity is no match at all. Mr. President, Pakistan's urgent priority right now is to ensure a rapid economic growth and lift millions out of poverty and hunger. To enable any such policy momentum, Pakistan needs a stable external environment. We look for peace with all our neighbors, including India. Sustainable peace and stability in South Asia, however, remains contingent upon a just and lasting solution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. At the heart of this long-standing dispute lies the denial of the inalienable right of the Kashmiri people to self-determination. India's illegal and unilateral actions of 5th August 2019 to change the internationally recognized disputed status of Jammu and Kashmir and to alter the demographic structure of the occupied territory further undermined the prospects of peace and inflamed regional tensions. India's ruthless campaign of repression against Kashmiris has continued to grow in scale and intensity. In pursuit of this heinous goal, New Delhi has ramped up its military deployments in occupied Jammu and Kashmir to 900,000 troops, thus making it the most militarized zone in the world. The serial brutalization of Kashmiris takes many forms: extrajudicial killings, incarceration, custodial torture and death, indiscriminate use of force, deliberate targeting of Kashmiri youth with pellet guns, and collective punishments imposed on entire communities. In a classic settler colonial project, India is seeking to turn the Muslim-majority Jammu and Kashmir into a Hindu territory through illegal demographic changes. Millions of fake domicile certificates have been issued to non-Kashmiris. Kashmiri land and properties are being seized. Electoral districts have been gerrymandered, and over 2.5 million non-Kashmiri illegal voters fraudulently registered. All this is in blatant violation of Security Council's resolutions and international law, particularly the 4th Geneva Convention. For our part, the Pakistani people have always stood by our Kashmiri brothers and sisters in complete solidarity and will continue to do so no matter what, until their right to self-determination is fully realized in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions. I assure the World Forum and this august platform that we in Pakistan remain consistent in our commitment to peace in South Asia. India must take credible steps to create enabling environment for constructive engagement. We are neighbors and we are there forever. The choice is ours, whether we live in peace or keep on fighting with each other. We have had 3 wars from 1947 onwards, and as a consequence, only miseries, poverty, unemployment increase on both sides. It's now up to us to resolve our differences, our problems, our issues, like peaceful neighbors through peaceful negotiations and discussions, and save our scarce resources for promoting education and health and employment to millions of people, young boys and girls on both sides of divide, and not waste our resources in buying more ammunition and trying to promote tension in this area. I think it's high time that India understands this message loud and clear, that both countries are armed to the teeth. War is not an option. It is not an option. It is not an option. Only peaceful dialogue can resolve these issues so that the world become more peaceful in times to come. Mr. President, Afghanistan today presents a unique challenge. 30 million Afghans are left without a functional economy. And banking system that allows ordinary Afghans to make a living, to be able to build a better future. Pakistan would also like to see Afghanistan, which is at peace with itself and the world, and which respects and nurtures all its citizens without regard to gender, ethnicity, and religion. Pakistan is working to encourage respect for the rights of Afghan girls and women to education and work. Yet, it is at this point, isolating the Afghan interim government could aggravate the suffering of the Afghan people who are already destitute. Constructive engagement and economic support are more likely to secure a positive response. A peaceful, prosperous, and connected Afghanistan in our collective interest. As a neighbor, Pakistan has a vital stake in peace and stability in Afghanistan. We have led the humanitarian efforts to help our Afghan brothers and sisters. We must avoid another civil war, a rising terrorism, drug trafficking, or new refugees, which none of Afghanistan's neighbors are in a position to accommodate. Pakistan urges the international community to respond in a positive way to the UN Secretary General's appeal for $4.2 billion in humanitarian and economic assistance to Afghanistan. Release Afghanistan's financial reserves, essential to revive its banking system. Pakistan shares the key concern of the international community regarding the threat posed by the major terrorist groups operating from Afghanistan, especially ISIL-K and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, as well as Al-Qaeda, ETIM, and IMU. They all need to be dealt with effectively and comprehensively with the support and cooperation of the interim Afghan authorities. In turn, the international community should address Afghanistan's dire humanitarian needs. Mr. President, Pakistan strongly condemns terrorism in all its forms and shades and manifestations. Terrorism does not have a religion, ladies and gentlemen. It is based on dogma, fueled by poverty, unemployment, deprivation, injustice, and ignorance, and fanned by vested interests. Pakistan is the principal victim of terrorism. Over the last 2 decades, we have suffered more than 80,000 casualties and over $150 billion in economic losses due to terrorist attack. Our armed forces, with the support of our people, mothers, traders, students, teachers, engineers, doctors, have broken the back of terrorism within Pakistan, yet we continue to suffer terrorist attacks from across our borders, sponsored and financed by our regional adversary. We are determined to defeat such cross-border terrorism. And I must say loud and clear, that the amount of sacrifices Pakistan has made to defeat terrorism over the period of time has been unprecedented in the contemporary history of Pakistan. I tell often to my friends, if you see somebody, a mother or a child or a boy limping on the streets of Pakistan, maybe he was a victim of terrorists years back. That is the kind of sacrifice Pakistan has paid. Our generals, our soldiers, our doctors, mothers, teachers, students, and traders, they all paid their lives for Pakistan's well-being and defeated terrorism. And this peace which was restored back in Pakistan after great sacrifices is not only for Pakistan, it is a peace for global countries and global community. And we are very proud of it. And this is the biggest manifestation of our commitment, our concern, and our continued efforts to defeat terrorism wherever it is. Mr. President, Islamophobia is a global phenomenon. Since 9/11, suspicion and fear of Muslims and discrimination against them have escalated to epidemic proportions. The officially sponsored campaign of oppression against India's over 200 million Muslims is the worst manifestation of Islamophobia. They are subjected to discriminatory laws and policies, hijab bans, attacks on mosques, and lynchings by Hindu mobs. I am particularly concerned by the calls for genocide against India's Muslims by some extremist groups. Earlier this year, this Assembly adopted a landmark resolution introduced by Pakistan on behalf of the OIC, designating 15th March as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. It's my sincere and ardent hope that this should lead to concrete measures by the UN and member states to combat Islamophobia and promote interfaith harmony. Mr. President, Pakistan is deeply concerned by the numerous conflicts across the Middle East, including in Syria and Yemen. We support all possible efforts to promote their peaceful resolutions. We call on Israel to put an immediate end to the blatant use of force and flagrant violations of human rights of the Palestinian people and the repeated desecration of the holy Al-Aqsa Mosque. The only just, comprehensive, and lasting solution of the Palestinian question is the acceptance of a viable, independent, and contiguous Palestinian state with the pre-1967 borders and Al-Quds Al-Sharif as its capital. Mr. President, the Security Council and the General Assembly must be empowered to play their respective roles under the UN Charter. The Security Council must be expanded by adding 11 new non-permanent members to make it more representative, democratic, transparent, effective, and accountable. Adding new permanent members will paralyze the Council's decision-making, enlarge its representational deficit, and create new centers of privilege in violation of principle of sovereign equality of member states. The nations of the world must step back from the precipice. We must restore peace in Europe, avoid a war in Asia, and resolve festering conflicts across the world. We must revive the vision which created the United Nations, a vision which is often blurred by national interest and hegemonic designs. Pakistan is a partner for peace. But, Mr. President, peace can only be ensured and guaranteed when rights of communities, who have been suffering over decades and subjugated over decades get their freedom, earn their freedom, and are respected. In this behalf, before I conclude, Mr. President, I would once again repeat at the cost of repetition that we want to have peace with India, but long-lasting, enduring peace can only be ensured and guaranteed through a just and fair solution of Kashmir, providing rights to the people of Kashmir under UN Charter, according to Security Council resolutions, the right of self-determination, and I will be most forthcoming to sit down then and talk to our Indian counterparts to pave the way forward for future so that our generations do not suffer, so that we spend our resources on mitigating miseries, on building structures to face these floods and outbursts of clouds. We are developing societies. We don't have unlimited resources. We must deploy our resources for the well-being of the people, for our children, for their promotion, for their empowerment, for their employment, for health, for education, and make Pakistan, and of course other developing societies must find their own place in community of nations through hard work, untiring efforts, and sacrifice. That is the only way forward. Therefore, we will work with all those committed to the United Charter's principles to restore the vision which created the United Nations and to equip this organization with the capacity to preserve global peace and promote universal prosperity. I thank you.
От имени Ассамблеи
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Ассамблея заслушает выступление премьер.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Samdesh Aka Mohasena Padei Techo Hun Sen, Prime Minister of the